All right, so we're diving deep into Stephen Covey today with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And you specifically asked to understand kind of the foundation of personal effectiveness and strong relationships. And we're going deep today. We're going to go beyond that typical self-help to uncover those like thought-provoking nuggets.
Yeah, and the thing is, we're not just going to list the 7 habits. We want to go deeper into kind of the why, the principles that can actually like make a difference in your life.
Okay, so to start things off, Covey, he throws down a challenge. The personality ethic versus the character ethic. And when I first read that,
Yeah.
I was like, hold on, is he saying that personality doesn't matter?
Right. No, it's not about
Like,
tossing
oh.
out personality altogether. It's more about recognizing that, the kind of lasting success, the kind that ripples out
Mm,
to your relationships and your effectiveness stems from this bedrock of strong character.
okay.
So think integrity, humility, courage, those inner qualities that shape how you navigate the world.
Yeah, those things you can't really fake. And it makes me think about the story he tells about his own son, the baseball.
Yeah, he was trying to help his son, who was struggling in baseball, and realized that he was, giving all this outward encouragement. But deep down, he didn't truly believe in his son's ability.
Mm.
He was focused on techniques, not on genuine belief.
Oh, wow.
And that's a light bulb moment that I think many of us can relate to,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right? Where our actions don't quite match up with our true feelings.
Oh, totally. I can think of times where, I was giving advice, but secretly I was doubting that that person could actually pull it off.
Yeah.
I wonder, have you ever been in that situation?
Yeah.
Where your outward actions and inner beliefs were misaligned? And how did that impact things?
I think we've all been there,
Yeah.
at some point. And that misalignment, as Covey points out, often stems from our paradigms. He
Yeah.
describes these as the maps that we use to make sense of the world.
All the math. I love that analogy. He uses that example of like trying to navigate Chicago with a map of Detroit. Like no matter how hard you try or how positive you are, you're going to get lost.
Exactly. And it's the same with our lives, if we're trying to solve problems.
Or achieve goals.
In the wrong map, the
Yeah.
flawed understanding of the situation, then our efforts are going to be misdirected.
Yeah, completely. And, here's where it gets really interesting. Covey actually says that the way we see a problem is often the
Yeah.
problem. And I know I've definitely been guilty of that. Have you found yourself like stuck in a situation where looking back, you're like, oh, my perspective was part of the issue. It's a challenge to admit that.
Absolutely. But so important for growth. It's about being willing to examine our own mental maps to see if they need adjusting. And that leads us to this next powerful idea, proactivity. Covey talks about being responsible, which is kind of a cool way of saying that we have more control than we think.
I love that. Responsible. And he introduces this idea of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence. So proactive people, they pour their energy into things that they can control. And that actually expands.
Direct influence, right?
Precisely. It's about focusing on what you can impact, taking action, rather than just reacting. Reactive people, on the other hand, dwell on the things they can't control, and they become victims of circumstance.
Oh, that's so true. And it makes me think about that amazing story of Gandhi, while everyone else was busy criticizing the British. Gandhi was focusing on what he could influence, building unity and strength within the Indian people. And that eventually led to huge political change. It's so inspiring because it shows that even when our circle of influence seems small, our choices and our actions can have a ripple effect.
It's a powerful example of that shift from feeling powerless to recognizing that we always have a choice in how we respond to what life throws at us.
Yeah, so powerful. And speaking of choices, Covey then gets into this whole idea of the PPC balance. And I remember when I first read that, I was like, what is this? This is kind of technical. But the analogy he uses makes it crystal clear. Yeah, you're talking about the goose and the golden egg analogy.
Yes, it's all about production versus production capability.
Right.
So if you're just obsessed with getting those golden eggs without taking care of the goose, you're setting yourself up for failure.
And think about how this applies to different areas of your life. In relationships, you can't just demand love and attention without putting in the effort to nurture that connection.
Yeah.
Same with your work, your health, your finances, anything that you value. You have to care for the goose. That produces those golden eggs if you want long-term sustainability. So where do you see this balance playing out in your own life?
Ooh, that's a good question. For me, I think about my own work-life balance. It's easy to get caught up in chasing those deadlines and achievements, but then neglecting those things that replenish my energy and creativity. I'm definitely guilty of.
Yes.
Burning the candle at both ends sometimes. How about you? Where do you see yourself getting out of balance?
Yeah, it's something we all grapple with, right? And this is where Covey's habit 2 comes in. Begin with the end in mind. And he's not just talking about setting goals here, right?
Right. It's much deeper than that.
It's about consciously designing your life based on your deepest values, envisioning the outcome that you truly desire. And I emphasize that, like building a house, having a solid mental creation, like that blueprint makes the physical creation much more effective.
Yeah, you got to have that vision before you start laying the bricks.
Exactly.
And, it makes me think about that story. He shares about his daughter and Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
He initially disliked the movies because he didn't get the underlying philosophy.
Yeah.
But by seeing it through her eyes, he gained this whole new appreciation.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's
He
such a great metaphor for life.
Yeah.
Sometimes we judge things based on our limited perspective. But when we take the time
Yeah.
to understand where someone else is coming from, it can completely change our view.
It's a powerful reminder that understanding often precedes appreciation. And it challenges us to think beyond, just our to-do lists and ask ourselves, what do I really want my life to be about? It's about those big picture questions that can guide our choices and our actions.
Yeah. This is getting deep, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Now, since we're talking about understanding others, let's dive into the emotional bank account.
Oh, such a brilliant metaphor.
No, I love that one.
Covey compares relationships to financial bank accounts. We make deposits. Through acts of kindness, honesty, kept promises, and we make withdrawals through disrespect, broken trust, or simply neglecting that relationship.
It's so relatable. Like, I think about those times when, communication with someone just feels strained, like you're walking on eggshells. It's often because
Downward drawn.
there've been too many withdrawals.
Exactly. And, building trust takes time and consistent effort, but it creates a foundation for strong communication and collaboration. And just like with the financial account, those deposits need to be greater than the withdrawals for the relationship to thrive.
So true. Now, Covey talks about this idea of public victory, which is all about effectiveness in our interactions with others. But he makes it clear that those first 3 habits, what he calls the private victories, are crucial prerequisites, right?
Absolutely. He argues that true interdependence, the kind that allows for genuine collaboration and synergy, requires individuals to first be independent and secure themselves, Because if you're still dependent on others for your sense of worth or direction, you're more likely to fall into those win-lose traps, always trying to prove yourself or get ahead at someone else's expense.
Yeah. It's like trying to build a house on a shaky foundation. It might look good on the surface, but it's not going to withstand the storms.
Exactly. Those private victories build the solid ground for everything else.
So how do we go from that independent foundation to genuine interdependence,
right,
to effectively working with others? Well, that's where Covey introduces habit 4. Think win-win. And it's more than just
a negotiation
tactic, right?
Yeah.
It's a whole philosophy of how we approach interactions.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not about being nice or giving in all the time. It's about finding solutions that benefit everyone involved.
Right. And he contrasts win-win thinking with win-lose, which is that, there's only one pie mentality.
Yeah.
And he shares that interesting example of that company president who wanted his team to cooperate. But he set up a reward system where only one person could win, a trip to Bermuda.
It's like encouraging one flower to grow while watering another one. It just completely undermines the idea of collaboration.
Totally.
And Covey argues that true win-win thinking requires 3 key traits: integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality.
Okay, let's unpack those a little bit. So integrity, that's about aligning our actions with our values, walking the talk. Maturity, as Covey describes it, is the balance between courage and consideration. It's about being able to express your own convictions while also respecting other people's viewpoints.
Right.
And then we already talked about the abundance mentality, that belief that there's enough out there for everyone, the opposite of that scarcity mindset. That leads to competition and fear. So building from these character traits, how do we actually start creating win-win situations? It's not always easy, right? Especially when you're dealing with someone who's stuck in that win-lose mode.
Right. You can't force someone to think win-win. But Covey suggests focusing on the relationship, even in those challenging situations. It's about making deposits in that emotional bank account, listening deeply, and genuinely seeking solutions that benefit both parties. And sometimes, if that person's unwilling to budge, you have to walk away. Remember, no deal is always an option. You don't have to compromise your own values or integrity to try and force a win-win situation.
Yeah, that's an important reminder.
Yeah.
Now, when those win-win relationships are in place, you can start building agreements that define and guide collaboration Covey talks about. Win-win agreements, shifting from top-down supervision to partnership.
Right.
And these agreements are interesting because they focus on results, not methods. It's about defining what needs to be achieved, setting clear guidelines and expectations, and then giving people the freedom to figure out the best way to get there. He gives this great example of a green and clean agreement with his son. It wasn't about telling his son how to do the yard work. It was about agreeing on the desired outcome, a tidy yard, and then letting his son take ownership of the process. That approach empowers people and fosters a sense of responsibility. It's about moving away from micromanaging and trusting people to get the job done. And he even suggests incorporating production capability into performance evaluations. So it's not just about hitting the numbers. It's how you achieve those results and how you impact others in the process.
I love that idea because it encourages people to think about the bigger picture, not just their individual goals.
He tells a story about a manager who was giving an employee a low rating, despite great results. Because the employee was neglecting the human element, kind of bulldozing over people to get things done. And the suggestion was to tie part of the employee's compensation to how others perceived him, encouraging him to focus on building those relationships and not just achieving results at any cost. It's about aligning systems and incentives to reinforce that win-win thinking, creating a culture where collaboration and mutual benefit are truly valued.
And that sets the stage beautifully. For habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood, which we'll dive into next. So habit 5, it's all about empathic listening, really getting into the other person's shoes before trying to make yourself heard. And this isn't about, techniques or tricks. It comes from a place of genuine respect and a desire to connect.
I think we all like to think we're good listeners. But Covey, he points out, we spend all this time learning to read, write, and speak. But how much time do we actually invest in learning to truly listen?
It's so true. We often rush to offer solutions or advice before we've even fully understood the other person's perspective.
Right. It's like we're already thinking about our response before they've even finished speaking.
Exactly.
And that's where empathic listening comes in. It's about listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart and mind.
He uses this fascinating example of the young woman image, where two people are looking at the same picture, but seeing completely different things based on their own perceptions.
Oh, yeah. It's like those optical illusions. Where you see one thing, then another, and it totally changes your understanding. It makes you realize how often we're talking past each other because we're not seeing the world through the same lens.
And until we understand those different lenses, those paradigms, it's difficult to have a truly productive conversation.
For sure.
And Covey talks about, different levels of listening, from ignoring to pretending to selective listening, where we only hear what we want to hear.
Oh, yeah. We've all been guilty of that.
At some point.
Definitely.
But then there's attentive listening.
Where
we're actually focusing on the words being spoken.
But
even attentive listening isn't enough for true understanding. So Covey introduces this 5th level, empathic listening, which goes beyond just hearing the words to understanding the speaker's feelings and the meaning behind their words.
It's like the difference between listening to a song and actually feeling the emotion behind the lyrics.
Exactly. And empathic listening doesn't mean you agree with the other person. It simply means you're making the effort to see the world through their eyes.
To really step into their shoes.
Put yourself in their shoes. Feel what they're feeling.
And I think that's so powerful because it allows you to connect on a much deeper level.
Covey shares a number of personal stories about how empathic listening created breakthroughs in these really difficult situations.
Oh, interesting.
One that stands out to me is about a man who was struggling with his son's rebellious behavior. And Covey initially tried to offer advice, but the man wasn't receptive. It was only when he truly listened to the man's pain and frustration, without judgment, that a shift happened.
Wow.
The man was finally able to articulate his own feelings and come to his own realization about how to handle the situation.
It's so powerful
Mm.
how empathy can create that safe space for people to process their emotions and find their own solutions.
You know, it's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Oh, I love that.
And it makes me think about those common traps that we fall into when we're trying to communicate. You know, we jump in with evaluations, judging whether we agree or disagree,
Mm-hmm.
or we start probing with questions from our own perspective, trying to steer the conversation in a certain direction.
Right.
And of course, there's the classic, giving advice based on our own experience.
Yeah.
It may not be relevant to the other person's situation at all.
Yeah, we've all done that.
And you've all been there. And then there's interpreting, trying to figure people out,
Yeah.
analyzing their motives based on our assumptions. And Covey argues that while these responses might be well-intentioned, they often get in the way of truly understanding where the other person is coming from.
It's about shifting the focus from
Yeah.
ourselves
Right.
to the other person,
Right.
putting aside our own agendas
Yeah.
and truly seeking to understand.
And a big part of that is understanding the speaker's feelings
Yeah.
and being able to reflect those feelings back in a way that shows you get it. It's not about parroting their words. It's about capturing the essence of what they're feeling and conveying that you understand.
Right.
Covey gives this example of a couple having an argument. And instead of getting defensive, the husband simply listened to his wife's frustration and reflected back. So you feel overwhelmed and unappreciated. And that simple act of empathy completely changed the dynamic of the conversation. It diffused the tension and allowed for a more productive dialogue.
It's amazing how powerful that validation can be, you know, just feeling heard and understood.
Yeah. It's like that quote, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And once we've genuinely sought to understand, then we can focus on making ourselves understood.
Okay.
Covey emphasizes being clear, specific, and respectful. In our communication, he talks about ethos, pathos, and logos. And persuasive communication,
Okay.
ethos is our personal credibility, the trust we've built with the other person.
Right.
Pathos is that emotional connection, the understanding and empathy for the other person's feelings. And logos is the logical reasoning, the evidence and data we use to support our points.
So we need all three.
He argues that all three elements are essential for effective communication. We need to be credible, empathetic, and logical in order to truly connect with others and build those win-win solutions.
This is great. Now, all this talk about understanding and connecting beautifully sets the stage. For habit 6, synergize. This is where the magic happens.
Yeah.
The habit of creative cooperation, where the whole becomes greater
Yeah.
than the sum of its parts.
Covey uses this metaphor of a third alternative, a solution that's better than either of the original ideas. It's not about compromise. It's about creating something new and innovative.
I love that. The third alternative.
Yeah.
It makes me think about that story he tells about going camping with his wife.
Oh, yeah.
And they had different ideas about where to set up camp. His wife wanted a spot with a view, while he wanted to be near the fishing stream. And they could have compromised, ending up in a spot that neither of them loved.
Right.
But instead, they talked it through. They listened to each other's perspectives, and they came up with this third alternative, a spot that had both a stunning view and was near the fishing. It's a perfect illustration of how synergy can create those win-win outcomes that are better than either party could have imagined alone.
It's about valuing differences, recognizing that each person brings unique strengths and perspectives to the table.
And that's so counterintuitive in a culture that often emphasizes conformity.
Right.
We're taught to fit in,
Yeah.
to think alike.
Yeah.
But Covey argues that sameness is not oneness.
Right. True unity comes from valuing and leveraging those differences. It's like a choir where all these different voices blend together to create this harmonious sound.
I love that analogy.
Each voice is essential to the overall effect.
It makes me think about teamwork.
Uh,
You know, when everyone's trying to play the same role,
Yeah.
it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But when you have people with different skills and perspectives
Mm.
working together towards a common goal,
that's where the magic happens.
and that requires open communication and trust.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people need to feel safe to express their ideas
I-
without fear of judgment or ridicule.
Yeah, that's safe space.
Covey talks about creating a spirit of adventure, a willingness to explore new possibilities and embrace the unknown.
Ooh, I like that.
That's where the real innovation happens.
It reminds me of like those brainstorming sessions
Yeah.
where you're just throwing out ideas, no matter how crazy they seem, because you never know what spark of creativity will ignite something amazing.
And then, of course, it's about taking those ideas and refining them, evaluating and selecting the best ones, developing a plan to bring them to life. Synergy is a process, not just a one-time event.
Right?
It requires ongoing communication
Yeah.
and a willingness to adapt as needed.
It's a journey, not a destination.
And it's not just about,
Achieving the goal.
right,
Yeah.
it's about celebrating those
That's perfect.
successes
Wow.
along the way
Yeah.
and recognizing the contributions
Yeah.
of everyone involved.
It's about creating that positive feedback loop that reinforces collaboration and keeps people motivated.
Yeah.
It's about building that sense of shared ownership
Yeah.
and accomplishment.
We've talked about the first 6 habits, which are all about personal and interpersonal effectiveness. But there's one more habit that's essential for sustaining those habits and achieving true effectiveness
Yeah.
in all areas of life.
And that brings us to habit 7, sharpen the saw, the habit of renewal. It's about taking care of ourselves physically, spiritually, mentally, and socially.
Yeah.
Covey uses the analogy of a lumberjack trying to cut down a tree with a dull saw. It's hard work and it takes forever.
Yeah.
But if the lumberjack takes a few minutes to sharpen that saw, the work becomes much easier and more efficient. It's the same principle with our lives. If we're constantly pushing ourselves without taking time to renew, we'll eventually burn out. We become that dull saw, ineffective and exhausted.
That's a great analogy.
And he breaks down the 4 dimensions of renewal. So physically, it's about taking care of our bodies through exercise, good nutrition, stress management, recognizing that our physical health is the foundation for everything else.
Yeah, that's so important.
Spiritually, it's about connecting with our core values and beliefs. This could involve, prayer, meditation, spending time in nature, whatever helps you tap into that deeper sense of purpose and meaning mentally. It's about keeping our minds sharp and engaged, reading, learning new things, having stimulating conversations, all those things that keep us curious and intellectually vibrant.
Yeah, staying curious.
And then, of course, socially, emotionally, it's about nurturing our relationships and connecting with others, prioritizing those things that bring us joy and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, that human connection.
He suggests dedicating at least an hour a day to activities that renew us. In each of these areas, he calls this the daily private victory, arguing that it's the key to sustaining the 7 habits and achieving true effectiveness in our lives. It's about recognizing that self-care isn't selfish, it's essential.
It's an investment.
It is. And he also emphasizes aligning our values with our actions, both personally and professionally. When we're living in harmony with our core principles, we experience a deeper sense of peace and fulfillment.
It's like everything just clicks into place.
It does. And he also encourages us to embrace continuous improvement, always be learning and growing. He uses this image of an upward spiral where each loop builds upon the previous one.
I like that.
Growth is a journey, not a destination.
It's a process. It makes me think about those times when I've felt, stuck or discouraged. And it's usually because I've stopped learning, I've stopped challenging myself. But when I actively seek out new experiences and knowledge, I feel that renewed sense of purpose and direction.
And through it all, Covey reminds us to live with integrity, to be true to ourselves and our values. He argues that integrity is the foundation for true success and happiness.
Yeah, it's that inner compass that guides us.
Yeah. And he closes with this powerful call to action, urging us to open ourselves to the possibility of change and growth, reminding us that we have the power to choose differently, to become these principle-centered individuals living with purpose and meaning.
Oh, that's so good. So now for the big question that you posed earlier. What happens when those values come into conflict with each other?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to those bigger societal issues. How do we prioritize when everything seems important?
That is a tough one. But I think Covey's framework gives us some guidance here. He encourages us to start with our own personal mission statement, those core principles that guide our lives. And then to use our conscience, our sense of right and wrong, to help us navigate those difficult decisions. It's about seeking wisdom, from both within and from those we trust.
Like trusting our gut.
And recognizing that sometimes the most effective action is the one that aligns with our deepest values, even if it's not the easiest or most popular choice.
Right.
It's about having the courage to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's challenging.
To do the right thing.
And doing so with humility, Recognizing that we don't have all the answers and that others may have valuable perspectives that can
It's
enrich our own.
that open-mindedness.
Exactly.
So, in a way, it's about integrating all of the 7 habits, being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, putting first things first, thinking win-win, seeking first to understand, then to be understood, synergizing, and sharpening the saw. It's about using these habits as a compass to guide us through life's complexities, both personally and collectively.
It's about recognizing that we're all on this journey together and that by supporting and encouraging each other, we can create a more just, compassionate, and fulfilling world for all.
It's like, as we're talking about this journey together and supporting each other, it makes me think about Covey's concept of the emotional bank account, but in a new light. What if we considered a societal emotional bank account? Like, what if we thought about the actions we take as individuals and as communities as like deposits or withdrawals from that account?
I love that. It's a fascinating way to look at it. What kind of deposits do you think would build trust and cooperation on that societal level?
I think things like simple acts of kindness and compassion, you know, those everyday moments where we choose to help someone out or offer a listening ear, volunteering our time and resources to causes we believe in, speaking out against injustice, and engaging in civil discourse, even when we disagree. Those all feel like deposits in that societal account.
I see it. It's like we're building up this reservoir of goodwill and shared responsibility. And those withdrawals would be actions that erode trust and creating division. Things like, prejudice, discrimination, violence, all those things that chip away at that societal balance.
Right. And I think it highlights how interconnected we truly are. You know, our actions, both big and small, they impact that social fabric in these profound ways. It's a call to be mindful of the transactions we're making every day. Well, we've covered so much in our deep dive into the 7 habits. We explored character, relationships, principles, paradigms, even those bigger societal implications. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to what we do with these ideas.
Absolutely. Knowledge without action is like a seed that never gets planted. It has potential, but it won't bear fruit unless we nurture it. So what are some practical steps we can take to actually bring these principles to life?
Well, Covey emphasizes starting small. Pick one habit that really resonates with you and just focus on practicing it consistently. Don't try to overhaul your entire life overnight.
Right.
Small, consistent steps create lasting change.
He also talks about the importance of patience. It takes time to develop new habits. Shift our paradigm. So be kind to yourself in the process, Celebrate your progress. And if you stumble, don't beat yourself up. Just learn from it. Keep moving forward.
Give yourself grace.
And he also suggests finding an accountability partner, someone who can support you and cheer you on along the way. It's amazing how much easier it is to stick with something when you have someone to share the journey with.
Totally. That support system can make all the difference.
And don't forget to regularly reflect on your progress. You know what's working, what needs adjusting. It's this continuous process of learning and growth.
Yeah, it's a journey, not a destination. I think that's a key takeaway from the 7 habits. It's not about achieving, some external measure of success. It's about creating a life that's aligned with your values, a life of purpose and meaning. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, not just for your own benefit, but for the benefit of everyone around you.
Beautifully said. And that, I believe, is the true essence of the 7 habits of highly effective people. It's a reminder that we all have the power to choose how we respond to the world, to become more proactive and principle-centered individuals. And in doing so, we create this ripple effect that impacts not just our own lives, but the lives of those around us, making the world a little brighter, a little kinder, a little more effective, one interaction at a time.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to put it. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the 7 habits. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. Remember, the journey toward effectiveness is ongoing. Keep exploring, keep growing, and keep striving to become the best version of yourself. Until next time, keep diving deep.